Jude LeCavallon with John Hook. 25 years ago this month, the world stopped. The World Series stopped, and John Hook was there. I was on the air at KTAR 620 Sportsline, and the sports world stopped. But let's go to that moment. Take us back 25 years ago this October.
Sitting with my dad. He got tickets through his office. We had a choice of Game 5 against the Cubs in the NLCS or the World Series Game 3. And I told him, I said, if you've given me a pick, I've never seen a World Series game, let's go to Game 3. So we did. Sitting along the first base line about halfway down in the lower bleachers. Now, this is the area that's on hydraulic pillars at Candlestick. So when the shaking started, you cannot imagine
Where did
how
you
much
think it was?
Jude, I'd been away from California. I grew up there in Menlo Park. I'd been away for long enough that I really didn't know. At first, I thought the fans were doing this.
Right.
And I turned to my dad and I said, they better ease it up or they're going to bring this thing down. And he looks at me and says, this is an earthquake.
Wow, he knew instantly.
He knew instantly. Scoreboard went black. The whole place went black. And what I remember is a silence and a dust that started rising. You could see this dust from shaking that old stadium. And then everybody in unison started chanting, play ball, play ball. They took it as an omen. Giants fans were down 0-2 in that series. It was the Battle of the Bay.
Absolutely.
And so the fans thought, the San Francisco fans took it as an omen. Okay, earthquake, we're going to win this thing.
Now, everybody that was there says it wasn't just 7, 10, 12 seconds. The reverberation, the whole experience was much longer than that.
It was that, and then it was the moment of panic of thinking, how are we going to get out of here? Because fortunately, it was 5:05 basically when it happened. 5:05, 5:06. It was still light. That was the first big break that we caught. It was light in the stadium because no lights were on. They had to get everybody out of there. I saw the first base coach, Kim, make this signal, and I turned to my dad. I said, they're not going to play baseball tonight. So let's get out of here. He had his transistor radio. He said, the Bay Bridge is down.
The images from we're back at KTAR, the Bay Bridge, and what is it, the Nimitz Freeway, just buckling
880,
down.
Cypress 880.
Oh, man.
Which I had driven many times going up to Lake Tahoe.
What's amazing to me, you thought it was utter devastation. In the aftermath, tragically, 63 people lost their lives, but it looked so much worse.
It did.
That first few hours. I mean,
there were a couple of things about that. The people who watched it at home, Al Michaels, actually the broadcaster for ABC, he is from my neighborhood in Menlo Park. He called the San Francisco Giants for years. So he knew that area. So to have him on the air at that time was masterful because he knew the topography, he knew the geography, he knew that there was a fire burning in the marina, he knew the Bay Bridge was down. He told it as a journalist, not as a sports guy. So having Al Michaels in the booth that night was fortuitous. Walking out of there, it was a really interesting thing.
No stampede. The crowd control was amazing.
It was very mellow.
That was impressive, to say the least, in the midst of this tragedy.
People were somber, but they were walking out, and I was trying to find a phone, a brick phone, that I could do a phone report. Anybody that I found with when they weren't working, all of that was down. This is in the infancy of cell phones. Some people had them in their cars on a cradle. So we tried to get reports out, and I was up there on vacation and ended up working 10 days straight at 880 Cypress in Oakland. I took Bart over every morning. Bart was still running. Took Bart over and covered the calamity on the 880, which had pancaked.
John, there was an image that I'll never forget. There's a number of images, but it's Joe DiMaggio, the Hall of Famer. His neighborhood, the Marina District, if I recall, evacuated. He was, as we would later find out, looking for his sister, and he was carrying a bag of cash. I mean, the people were thinking Armageddon here, right? And here he is waiting in line along with other citizens from that neighborhood. Unforgettable
That's
image.
amazing you mentioned that, because I interviewed him and talked to him in line at a FEMA line looking for assistance because his place had been shaken up pretty badly and he was out. So there's Joe DiMaggio on the street. The other thing I will never forget, at 880, there was a father who held vigil probably 5 or 6 days. He said, my son is up there, I know he's in there. And he never left, and his son was killed.
Oh, wow. Those images were unforgettable. And, you know, what was interesting, baseball was going through the tragedy of losing the commissioner, Bart Giamatti, earlier in September. And then it only took 10 days, and there's a Phoenix tie-in because the Oakland A's trained here at Phoenix Muni, of course.
Right.
They came here to take a break, then it went back, and people forget they swept the series. They played it 10 days later.
That's exactly right. Went back for Game 3. They honored the ticket. We were back in the same seat, and the game went on. Giants lost, of course, and they lost Game 4. But to play baseball again after what had happened was it was a good thing for the Bay Area to get through it.
I was amazed that the stick stood up again.
It held up. It held up. I'll tell you, though, walking out that night, there were chunks of cement on the concourse as you walked out that had fallen from that upper concourse. There were pieces of cement, and people were picking them up as souvenirs. It was pretty scary stuff.
25 years ago, the quake that stopped the World Series. Wow, that's a reflection, John.
Thanks, Jude.